Old Testament. When you teach it as narrative, you've got to be very careful that you don't teach the story as having a moral in of itself, because sometimes it's just a description of an event, not a moral implication of what one ought to do because of the event. You see? Sometimes you can see the consequences, and there is a moral consequence. In this case, it's not that way. Am I answering your question about the concubine?
Well, you answered the question about the purpose for its inclusion in this passage, but not the question of
does God justify?
Why are there so many instances in the Bible where this is in there?
Because that's the culture.
Where there's no
condemnation of it.
Well, or no approval or disapproval or whatever God thinks about.
He checks with God to go to war with.
The only place where I've seen disapproval was with what's his name that had like 2,000 of them or something.
Yeah, but
they got him to worship false gods.
Right.
Solomon.
Right.
Yeah.
But here's the dilemma. You don't have approval or disapproval about polygamy, but you do see the consequences of polygamy in a negative light. You don't have disapproval about slavery. In fact, you have an institution on how it's limited, okay?
Right.
And even in the New Testament, it's not prohibited, because God works within the cultures that men have, and he wants to transform their conscience rather than their legislation. Their legislation should be a result of their conscience, not the other way around. Do you see what I'm saying? When you look, if legislation could change men's lives, I would have been involved in the political process. I wouldn't be a missionary. I'd run for politics, or I'd be a hippie. Okay, but politics don't change people. Only God does.
Is there any prohibition, though, in the Old Testament to more than one wife or more than
none? There is a prohibition about divorcing a wife and taking her back.
Right.
Was the condemnation of Solomon's 2,000 wives? Was it about the wives, or was it about the wives leading him to idolatry?
I think
was that more what
one was stated, the other was implied.
Which was stated? Which was
the leading to idolatry.
That was stated.
False gods. Yeah.
Okay.
That was stated. Yeah. But I think the implication is enough's enough, man. But the reason that what you need to understand is, okay, let me take a moment. Solomon is not just King Solomon. Okay, King Solomon is the placeholder for the Messiah. He is the son of David. Even his name is Jedediah. Okay, but his name means peace. Shlomo, okay? The whole idea is he is the Prince of Peace. He is the Messianic hope. And in some ways, he is the Messiah. His failure in this regard disqualifies him, so now we have to look for somebody else. But when we look for Messiah, we're looking for Solomon. Who is the Solomon we're looking for? The sagacious king. Don't miss that. In the Old Testament, the Messianic king is sagacious. That's what the book of Proverbs is.
Sagacious?
Wise.
Oh.
Okay? The sagacious king. The whole idea of the book of Proverbs is the wisdom is for a king. Okay? And so the ultimate king is going to be wise. And Jesus is the sagacious king. Of all the things we study about him, the one thing we don't generally talk about is his wisdom. Jesus is wisdom. His proverbs, his teachings are all, he more than anyone else except James talks more in proverbs than anybody else does. He is the wisdom king that's described. The book of Proverbs describes what the Messiah will be like. He'll be the wise king. Here comes Jesus. And so Solomon becomes that. So the description of 2,000 is hyperbole. Maybe he did have 2,000. But the hyperbole is he'll be the wealthiest. He'll be the grandest. He'll be the greatest. His wisdom will go all over the world. People will come to him. The wisdom of Solomon, Sheba will come. Yes.
That's what I always had a question about. God answered his prayer and gave him the gift of wisdom. How come he didn't have wisdom concerning women?
Who does? I couldn't resist. I'm sorry. I hope that wasn't chauvinistic. My point was, you know what? I'm sorry. I thought we were friendly enough. I can
it's
say
okay.
that.
I'm not offended.
But I think you guys need to just back up a little bit, okay, and stop bringing to the text more than the text is indicating. When the text talks about his wisdom, it talks about it. I mean, you want the historical David, you want the historical Solomon, you want to analyze the historical Solomon and his life. We have a glimpse of the historical Solomon. What we have is the historical Solomon being used as a prototype for something else. And what you want to look at is the prototype. You know, Solomon's weaknesses disqualified him from being the Messiah. But it's his descriptions that become what the Messianic kingdom... If you want to describe what the Messianic kingdom is going to be, go back and describe Solomon's reign. Peace. He built the temple. He expanded his...
He was generous.
He was generous. He was wise. People came to him. Wisdom flowed out of Jerusalem. You know, the nations, Gentiles came to listen to him. All of those things become the prototype of a messianic hope. So what you need to understand is this writer isn't wanting you to analyze King Solomon. He's wanting you to analyze Solomon the type and Solomon the fault. And the fault was women. Not just women, but, you know, that wisdom itself isn't the answer. That somehow or other, with all that wisdom, he failed to understand something. And that's probably, you know, again, this is a little deeper than some of you guys are ready to go, but if you read the Song of Solomon, the Song of Solomon is basically saying that as wonderful as erotic love is, it ain't enough. You know what I'm saying? That's how it functions in the canon. It functions in the canon to say, yeah, erotic love is great, you know, but it isn't enough. It doesn't fulfill ultimately what has to happen. Because Solomon had all, and you know, and I think Jesus
that
is
is Solomon, the Song of Solomon.
It's attributed to him,
and it's prior to his marriage.
You don't actually. You know what? Don't force me to determine when it was written. It was attributed.
No,
to
I'm
Solomon.
saying that the erotic part precedes their wedding day. Correct.
No, there's no chronology. No, there's no chronology.
Or we don't know when the wedding day was.
There's no narrative there. Those who force a narrative on it are just as imaginative as anybody else. It's basically 7 love poems that are.
I thought the wedding was the culmination of it.
Yeah, right. Well, that's if you're into a
If you're
Christian
reading a
worldview
chronology.
and you want to force something on it, you can. But if you let the text speak for itself, we're kind of digressing.
Okay.
But what I'm trying to get us to is this. What I'm saying is, this description of David is ultimately a way to say, look how, and the text tells us. What does it say at the end? At the end of the description, what does it say? David recognized God was with him, and at the end of the whole description, what does it say? And God was with him. So that's what the writer wants you to see, that the blessings of, and in this world, having a large concubine and all of these kids is blessing. Okay? So God gave him the blessings. He didn't pursue it, God gave it to him. And now we have the description, and I'm going to do this in 5 minutes, of the 2 battles of the Philistines. And the battles of the Philistines probably happened before David took Jerusalem. But the only reason it's put after it is because there's this continuation about ascendancy to throne. You know, what did his kingship look like? So there's this telescopic kind of section about, to the end of his life, this is what he looked like. Now let's go back to the action. Okay, he's made king over the united Israel. Okay, the Philistines hear that he's made king. Look, as long as he's in Hebron, he's no trouble. He could still be a vassal for all they care. But now that he's king over the united Philistines, united Israel, the Philistines go, no, that's not going to cut it, man. You know, especially if he's going to unite the nation. A united nation's a lot more difficult to conquer. And so they start the war, right? They come down, and David goes down to the stronghold. Now, we don't know where the stronghold is. There's an argument as to whether it's Jerusalem, if he conquered Jerusalem yet or not. The idea is that he goes down to a place that he's been before. Some say it's Adullam, which was called the stronghold. It's just south of Jerusalem. He didn't want to fight in Hebron. He didn't feel that Hebron was the best place to launch out from. So he leaves Hebron and he goes to the stronghold. And then the description is that the Philistines come to the valley of Rephaim. Rephaim means giants or ghosts. Who knows why it's called that valley? Maybe it has a historical context or something. The point is, the Philistines spread out. And again, we have this classic story of David not doing anything without seeking the Lord's will. Now remember, this was all written to show us what a good king does as opposed to a bad king. What is a good